Hi everybody! I hope you're all having a good day. I hope you're all smiling and enjoying your lovely day. In this following tutorial, I'm going to be showing you on how to convert an FBX model into a Warudo avatar. That way you can quickly port your FBX model into Warudo with an asset bundle model. Now, if you ever have been wondering, I wonder if there's a way where I can skip the VRM process. You know, I want to have my custom shaders now, I want my custom constraints now, particles, every crazy thing that VRM can't support, I want it on my model immediately. So, and also even if you're a VRChat user as well, because for VRChat users, you just, put your FBX file into Unity, add your crazy stuff, and export it into a VRChat asset bundle model, and pretty much this is the same method, except we're talking about Warudo in this case. So for this method, we'll convert FBX into Warudo, so that way, Warudo Avatar, so we can do all that crazy stuff. Now, I will mention, before we get started, I got a lot of things to say. First and foremost, please make sure that you watch the Warudo SDK tutorial that I've made for beginners regarding the installation process. Make sure that you know how to do that because this tutorial will not be able to explain how to install the Warudo SDK, so please check that tutorial before proceeding with this one. Also, this tutorial will assume that you already know how to model from scratch, how to do some rigging, or at least you know how to kit bash, or you know the basics of 3D. You know what a model or a mesh is, you know what an armature rigging is or bones, you know what blend shapes are, or what, all this 3D basic knowledge. If you have no idea what the words I just mentioned to you just now, then please take some time to look up some Blender tutorials, Unity tutorials, and all that before going to this tutorial. I will also leave in the description this one tutorial series that this person does a really great job at explaining how you can model for beginners, for Blender users. So if you want to get some knowledge regarding how to model from scratch, please check out that tutorial in the description below. It's really good, heavily recommend. Either way though, what we are going to do before we export our model, there are some things I have to mention. First and foremost, make sure that your model is set to a T-pose. You cannot have A-pose models like a MMD model. You can't do this. You can't. Unity does not like A-pose models, and it has to stay T-pose, especially since we're talking about mocap and retargeting stuff. It's easier to have a T-pose than an A-pose for this case, so make sure that your model is set to T-pose. I also recommend as well, in case you ever run into some thumb issues with leap motion especially, make sure that your thumb is set to something like this instead of whatever the heck my model has. I run into issues with this thumb, believe me, but if you have your thumb like this, you can reference a Void model for the thumb position. This is actually going to be pretty nice when it comes to your tracking. So I recommend a thumb or a hand pose like this. Please do not please don't try and act all fancy and, have your fingers be curled up thinking that that's looking pretty and all. No, do not pose those hands. We pose those hands when we get to Warudo. For the neutral pose, we have to keep the fingers completely straight. I also recommend as well, please don't have your hands widen like this. I recommend just keep it straight as best as you can. Keep it straight as possible. The thumb, you can have it like this. So reference this hand, for the base hand you should have when putting it into Warudo. So keep that in mind. If by any chance, you have some issues with changing the posing of your model, of course, you can refer to my Cat's Blender plugin tutorial that I made regarding changing from A pose to T pose or vice versa. But you're gonna have to do A pose to T pose if any, or just change the pose. So I'll leave that tutorial. There's a lot of tutorials in the description below regarding some extra information on changing the rest pose of the armature, just to keep things simple. But otherwise though, as long as your model is T-pose, that your thumbs here are kind of sticking out a bit. For my case, I'm just gonna leave my hands the way they are, let the model be broken. But, other than that, I will also mention as well, we do need to make sure that it is a humanoid model. Now, you could be a bit hacky and have it so that way, despite it being a humanoid rig, you can have your avatar be like a shark tuber or a bird or dragon or anything like that. So, those, I'm not going to be covering over those kinds of avatars. That could be for a different tutorial though. But for this tutorial, I'll be focusing strictly on humanoid avatars. So do do keep that in mind, that you're probably going to be doing some hacky stuff depending on what VTuber you are. So either way, I will also recommend to make sure that your transformations are all applied properly. So select your model, make sure to go to Object, Apply all transformations, and then make sure to select your armature, go to Pose Mode, select all your bones, and make sure to do Alt-R, Alt-G, Alt-S to make sure that nothing is moving on your armature, to make sure that it's all well put. I also recommend as well making sure that all your modifiers are applied except the armature modifier as shown here. That way your model can, the blend shapes can properly load, everything can properly load, and all is good. So keep your model as clean as possible. And with that being said, if there by any chance you run into any other further issues, of course, with your 3D model, feel free to contact the Warudo Discord server. We'd be happy to help you out. Now, I'm going to go ahead now and I'm going to go to File, Export, FBX, and then I'm going to prepare the settings here. Now, I do want to mention this before I get into these settings. Please do not touch, unless you know what you're doing, do not touch this setting called Add Leaf Bones. This is actually very important to have leaf bones with the normalization process, because for some reason with how Unity or how Warudo normalizes their stuff, Warudo doesn't like it where, you see how like my fingers here, right? You see how like there's no like end bone here? Because this here, right? This random bone that appears off the mesh like this, that doesn't move at all. This is a leaf bone or an end bone, but we usually call it leaf bones. This will help ensure that during the normalization process, your fingers or your twist bones don't frick up. So keep that in mind. Please have some leaf, please leave that setting I just mentioned on. Don't deactivate it. Now, if you have custom leaf bones already, if you already know that you have leaf bones on your model already, then yes, you can deactivate, you can turn off that setting. But otherwise, though, for the sake of, for most models, I'd say most normalization issues with Warudo, especially with the SDK, they somehow come from because of the lack of leaf bones, because the normalization just breaks stuff. So I'd say just keep that in mind. Most of your normalization issues will come from this, but otherwise there may be some other cases depending on your model where it could be something else. So just be mindful of that. But either way, make sure to have leaf bones active, and then apply scaling, set that to FBX all, and then make sure to click on apply transform right here, so that way you can be able to, have everything all force transform, so that way we have less issues. And you can actually be able to export your model like so, just like that. Now, let's go to Unity right now, and we're gonna go ahead and click on Warudo, click on new mod, and then we're going to name our mod My Avatar. Name it wherever you want though. I leave the create in folder by default, create mod, and from here we can actually begin with putting our model into Unity to prepare for Warudo Avatar. So what you're going to do after you made your mod folder for your avatar, you're going to import the FBX and the texture files into that folder and give it some time for Unity to process. It should take no more than 5 minutes for your FBX file to properly import into Unity. So once you have your FBX and textures imported into Unity, what you're going to then do is click and drag your FBX file over to your hierarchy, so that way your model can appear in the center of your scene. And once you have your model here, what you're going to then do is you're going to click on your FBX file in the Assets panel. You're going to make sure to click on the Rig tab and make sure to set your animation type to humanoid and click on Apply. Give it some time for Unity to process your rig, so that way it is set to humanoid. Once Unity is finished with processing your humanoid rig, you're going to click on Configure, and then once the humanoid configurations panel appears, this is where you're going to be doing some edits to the rig to make sure that things are properly registered. Now, there's always the common register issue with Unity where it will randomly register a bone to your jawbone. So right over here, if you go to the head, if you click head over here, as you can see, for my case, I do have a jawbone, but I don't want to use a jawbone as I am going to be using blend shapes. A lot of times they'll register as a hair bone or something like that, so make sure to click on it and press the delete key. So make sure you do that. Do not be alarmed if by any chance if there's some parts of your model where, let's say for instance, you don't have any eye bones like at all, and like, because sometimes there are some models that don't have eye bones at all and some that do. So anytime you see these dotted little lines over here, these are optional bones. It really depends on what model, what model you're really converting for and such, and how it's rigged. But usually I try my best to fill out all of the bones here for Unity, but otherwise for some cases you may have them all with 4 fingers or 1 finger. But, you know, just keep in mind, try your best, if anything, to try and fill out as many bones as possible. But it's okay if there is some bones, the ones that are set to optional, if some of them are missing. But for bones like this here, these are mandatory to have, like the legs here, the ankles, the wrist, and all that. These are mandatory, so do keep that in mind, that if these mandatory bones are missing, you may experience some difficulties with your model. Again, I heavily recommend referencing the Void skeleton for reference on the humanoid skeleton for VTubing purposes. But otherwise though, for my model's case though, because I have metacarpal bones, which that's literally just the bones that are inside our palm, because I have these extra bones, I will need to change the registration of this so that way it can properly look good. So give me some time, I'll do a time skip so that way I can quickly fix this finger issue. Alright, I went ahead and changed my hand settings so that way they're now properly registered when it comes to bones like this. So this is also important as well if your model happens to have metacarpal bones like this, where there's bones inside the palm, like so. Definitely make sure that the proximal bones here are properly registered so you don't experience some weird finger bending. So just keep that in mind. But otherwise though, now that we changed some settings to ensure that the registration is done properly, we have this error called character not in T-pose. In order to fix this issue, all you have to do is scroll all the way down, click on pose, and then either enforce T-pose or reset. And if by any chance reset doesn't help, then you can of course click on enforce T-pose, and it should help you do the job fine. Definitely make sure to double check, by the way, on your model's hands or something like that to make sure that the hands or the legs and everything, they look proper before continuing. Go ahead and you can click on the done button and click on apply, so that way after it's finished applying, it'll go immediately to the normal setting, the normal scene settings, so that way we can be able to set up our materials and stuff. So once you finish applying all your humanoid configuration settings, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to go into the model tab here. And then what we're going to do is we're going to make sure to click on read and write over here. That way the SDK can work perfectly fine when it comes to our model. And then what we're going to do is we're going to make sure that legacy blend shape normals is active, since our model does have blend shape, we have to make sure that our normals don't look really stupid or anything like that when the mouse moves. So make sure to have this on. If you experience any issues with your normals, you can of course mess with these other settings if you desire, depending on what you want, but legacy blend shape normal should be enough. So make sure those are checked on. And then once this is done finishing, we will then be able to set up our materials. So once we apply these settings, now we're going to go into our materials tab, and then we're going to, before we actually do this, we're going to right click in the assets panel, create and make a new folder. We're going to name this materials, and then you're going to go ahead and click on your avatar, click on extract materials, and then go to material folder that you just made and select folder. Give Unity some time to extract all of these materials, and this is where we're going to be able to do most of our custom stuff. So as you can see with my character, you can see that my character has no color besides the color white, and my character is supposed to be blue. So with these materials, we can be able to do all of our shader stuff. So we can add our texture to give our character some, the correct colors, and then making sure also that if you want to do some crazy stuff with, let's say, toggles or anything like that, you can make sure to set them all up here. So with your materials, now I'm not going to set all of these materials up for the sake of this tutorial though, But pretty much though, what you can do is, of course, you can have custom shaders. So you can have Poyomi, Little Toon, Real Toon, whatever you want, as long as it works with the built-in render pipeline. Which, I guess I could say in other terms, if the shader works in VR chat, it most likely will work with Warudo. But of course, if you know how to do some custom shading, you know how to code it, or you use a plugin to use nodes to make a custom shader for built-in render pipeline, you can, of course, as long as you know it's a functional shader, it should be able to work perfectly fine with Warudo Avatar. So you can actually, I'm gonna do a quick time skip, and as you can see, I have Poyomi here, so you can literally just drag the Poyomi Uni package here, give it some time to process. This can also, again, apply to Real Toon, it can apply to Lil Toon, whatever shader, as long as it works with built-in render pipeline of Unity, you can use whatever you want. So give it some time for Poyomi to import. And once this is done importing, you can be able to set your materials to that custom shader, and you can do a lot of cool stuff. Now, again, for this tutorial, I'm not going to be showing you exactly how to set up Poyomi or anything like that. You'll have to set that up and experiment yourself, because it really depends on the shader goals that you're going for. Do you want a toon style model? Do you want realistic anime, soft style? Like there's just too many different styles to go through when it comes to shaders and avatar style. It really depends on what you personally think is best and what you want. So you can always check out Poyomi or any tutorials that do exist on YouTube regarding how to use the according shaders. But I'm going to go ahead and set all of the materials here. I'm going to click on shader up here, go to Poyomi, set it to this version of Poyomi, 8.1, or there'll be newer version of Poyomi, of course. But you're going to choose whichever shader is best for you. And then you can pretty much just play around with the settings however you want, depending on what you want. So for this case though, I'm not going to set up the textures at all, even though it looks weird. But again, I'm just going to skip it because, I don't want to take so much time on making my model look pretty for no reason. So either way though, now that you have your material set up, you have your humanoid rig set up, and then you have your model settings right here. Now what we are going to do is pretty much, before we of course set this for exporting, you could be able to add your crazy stuff. So if you want to have, let's say, a particle effect on your model, you can right click on effects, add a particle system, and you can be able to attach it. Let's say I want to attach this to, let's say for instance, I don't know, my hip or something like that. I don't know. So just, you can put it here. You can configure your particles however you want. So yes, you can have particles loaded onto your model by default if you want that. If you don't want that, you don't have to add it. You can also add physics, of course. Now you can add magical claws, dynamic bones, or you can have VR and spring bones. Now, this is something a lot of people will ask, especially if you're a VR chat user. You cannot use fizz bones. Now, technically, if you have exported your model, let's say you have your VR chat model, it has the fizz bones already, right? If you're going to be using, if you have the fizz bones on the model and you export, Warudo will force those fizz bones to become dynamic bones, no matter what. So do keep that in mind about that. So it'll be dynamic bones instead of fizz bones. So there'll be some differences you'll see in the physics. Now, if you really want to have, let's say, fizz bones for VTubers, right? I heavily recommend please get Magical Claws, because Magical Claws has a very amazing settings. They have angle limitations, they have interpolation curves for how the physics can move and the collision. You can even have mesh claws and stuff. So if you want to have very insane physics, Magical Claws is probably your best friend. There's a lot of great settings with it, and it works with Warudo. So Heavily recommend use Magical Cloth instead of Fizzbones for VTubers, but if you're a VR chat user, Fizzbones is probably the best because obviously optimization reasons. But for Warudo's case, we can't use Fizzbones due to copyright reasons because of VR chat, so use Magical Cloth if you want something closest to Fizzbones. But otherwise though, you could, leave the Fizzbones there, let it be converted to Dynamic Bones if you prefer, or you can use your own Spring Bones however you want. As long as you have like a component, you can add, let's say, your own Spring Bones and stuff. You can add your physics from here and all that, whatever you want. So keep that in mind. But you can add physics, particles, you can even do animations as well. Now, for the sake of this tutorial, I will not be covering how to do character animations, but for separate tutorial, I will be going over that, which I'll make sure to link in the description regarding non-humanoid animations. Like, let's say I want to have either, my wings flapping around and stuff, like an idle animation or a toggle. There'll be a more dedicated tutorial regarding animations in the description, and even how to set, like, let's say an idle animation for breathing or anything like that. Just an example. Warudo does have a breathing slider, by the way, just letting you know. But I'm just saying. That will be for that other tutorial. You'll see what I mean. So just check out that tutorial regarding animations in the description. But for the sake of simplicity though, once you add all your crazy stuff that you want, pretty much what you're going to then do is you're going to go into Warudo and we're going to do setup character here. So for FBX, this is very common that the normalized bones will be set to false. This is okay because when you do set up selection as game object, you can be able to normalize these bones thanks to this. Now, technically there is a manual way of doing it, but to be honest, Warudo as the program itself, even if you do the manual setup, it'll always force the normalization no matter what you do, even if you do the manual method. So honestly, the manual method can be kind of redundant, so you're gonna have to do this no matter what. So what I personally recommend, by the way, before we do this, is that I recommend having a duplicate of your model in the hierarchy. Especially if you're going to do constant model updating, you definitely want to make sure to have like a backup that's kind of easier to update and all that than the prefab. Especially if you're going to be replacing the FBX file itself. You can be able to replace the FBX file here much easily with, having the original file here than converting it to a prefab. Because prefab, especially with how Warudo does it, with Unity, you won't be able to easily replace the FBX file. So I recommend having a duplicate just in case if you do a lot of constant updating. Otherwise, you could, of course, stick with one, but I'm just giving a heads up. I personally prefer doing a duplicate. But we're going to click on Setup Selected Game Object as Character Mod, and we're going to give it some time for it to process, which should take, again, no more than 5 minutes. It should be pretty quick. But if it takes, again, too long, make sure to check if your RAM is maxed out or any crashing and stuff. So, keep an eye out for that. And otherwise, other than that, though, it should be able to normalize just like that. And as you can see, my fingers, my arms, they are not broken in any way. This is why I mentioned please make sure that you have your leaf bones exported or anything like that to ensure that your model's arms don't freak out. It is very important. But otherwise, once you have that, you should be able to have a character prefab in your folder right here for the mod. This is going to be what will be exported to Warudo, this character prefab here. This FBX file, it doesn't matter. Warudo SDK will only care about this prefab folder, or this prefab, not folder. But either way, this prefab will be what will be exported to Warudo. So what we're going to do once you, added all your stuff and you did the prefab thing, you're going to go into Warudo, mod settings, and here you can actually change the configure, the information regarding like the avatar, like who made the avatar, the version, mod name, which will be your avatar name, any description stuff if you like. This is especially important if you're going to be sharing the file with, Steam Workshop or with other clients and stuff. So I heavily recommend setting this up. You can even set up a little profile picture for the little avatar as well. Very nice. Now, if you did the new mod thing, the mod asset directory should already be set up, but by default, the mod export will be blank. So click on the little dots here. Now, for the case of Warudo, we will have to put it in this characters folder. So you can pause the video and find this file past here, but otherwise there is a quicker way to access this. So you can go make sure that Warudo is open, go to the paw and click on open data folder, and you can actually be able to go to the characters folder here, and then you can copy, you know, from double clicking here, Control C, and then Control V over here. But I also heavily recommend as well, if you're going to do a lot of conversions and stuff, especially for commissions or personal use, I heavily recommend going to the Warudo data folder, right clicking on streaming assets and pinning it to quick access. That way you can have a quick access right here, as you can see what I did. So that way you can quickly, you know, set up the directory, so that way it's just much more quicker and faster for you. So yeah, either way, once you have all your stuff set up here, I also will mention as well for the build, if by any chance your model tends to be a bit, you know, too giant in the file by any chance, you can change the optimize for to file size instead, which should kind of help make the Warudo Avatar file smaller. So if you really care about the file size of the, you know, of the Warudo Avatar, you can set it to file size so it's more optimized. But of course, you know, it really depends on what you want. You can experiment each of them to see which one's better for you. But otherwise though, once you have this set up, you're going to click on Warudo, build mod, and give it some time, of course, to export. Make sure that you save your Unity project, and it should take no more than 5 minutes to be able to export. But if it takes too long, you know, again, it could be the fact that Unity may have crashed or anything like that. So, but it should be very optimized regardless though. So it should not crash your PC whatsoever, unless you're super extremely super extremely potato PC, but otherwise you should be fine regardless. But either way, we're gonna give it some time to export, and I'll do a quick time skip. Alright, so once you have finished exporting, you should be able to go to your character, then go to your source, and then you should go to my avatar for my case, but otherwise your avatar may be named differently, and you should be able to see that your avatar should be functioning just fine. And as you can see, of course, there is a breathing animation on this version of Kana to ensure, you know, to let me know that, hey, this Kana is working. You can test, of course, with your mocap, depending on what you want, by going to motion capture and setting it up from there, and doing some experimenting to make sure that your model is working fine. Otherwise, you can do some debugging, you know, check for any weird arm issue or shading issues, and of course, you can, you know, you can always update the file. So if you ever want to update, like I said, because I did the duplicate, if you ever want to update, if you did a change, you can delete this character here, do your edits, then duplicate it again, and then you'll have to click on this, click on Warudo, click on set up character, and repeat again. Or, of course, you can, you know, if it's still a prefab, you know, set the character, you can, of course, click and drag the model, replace the prefab, and you should be pretty good from there. But otherwise though, that's pretty much in a nutshell on how you can actually convert an FBX model into a Warudo Avatar file, so that way you can skip the VRM process and be able to go straight into doing all your crazy stuff with Warudo. I do hope that you do have a lovely day then, and I hope, and I will also say as well, sorry for jumbling my words, oh my god, but I will say as well, if you ever need further help, please join the Warudo Discord server, because we have a lot of people over there that are willing to help out if you have any issues with the Warudo Avatar conversion and such. And feel free, of course, you know, if you want to ask me questions, feel free. I also have my own server if you want to ask questions directly to me. But otherwise though, I hope you guys have a lovely day though, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye bye! Thank you to all my Snowflake members. In case you don't know, I have YouTube membership, so if you want to further support this channel and what I do, then feel free to join the Snowflake members. Otherwise though, just your support means so much to me, and I appreciate every ounce of it. Either way though, with that being said though, hey, goodbye everyone! I hope to see you guys next time, okay? Bye bye!